My hand stopped moving the second I heard his voice through the wall. I was standing in the hallway outside my husband's home office, holding a glass of water I'd gone downstairs to get, and I just stopped. Because what I heard didn't make sense. Not at first. My brain kept trying to sort it into something normal, something explainable, the way you do when reality hands you something it shouldn't, he said. She can't find out about the policy. Not until after the baby is born. I stood there, my socks on the hardwood floor, 8 months pregnant, and I did not move. I barely breathed. The baby kicked hard, like she knew. I should back up. My name is Claire. I'm 32 years old. I'm a licensed CPA, a certified public accountant, and I've spent the last 8 years building a career in forensic accounting at a firm in Atlanta. I'm good at what I do. I find things people try to hide, discrepancies in spreadsheets, money that moves in directions it shouldn't, patterns that don't line up with the story someone is telling. My whole job is noticing when numbers lie. I met my husband 3 years ago at a charity gala my firm sponsored. His name is Elliot. He was charming in the particular way that men from old Southern money tend to be. Easy smiles, a handshake that communicated confidence without effort, the kind of comfortable ease that comes from never once worrying about whether a check would clear. I thought that ease was kindness. I was wrong about a lot of things. We got married 14 months later. Quick, I know. My mother said so at the time. My best friend Kezia said so too. But I was 31 and I was in love, and I believed I knew this man. I believed we wanted the same things. The pregnancy was planned. We'd talked about it for months. The timing, the house, the school district. We were deliberate about it the way people who work in finance tend to be deliberate about everything. When the test came back positive in February, I cried in the bathroom with the door locked, not because I was scared, but because I was so completely, overwhelmingly happy that I needed a minute to hold it alone before I shared it with anyone. When I told Elliot, he picked me up off the ground, literally lifted me. Or at least, I thought that's what that moment was. Looking back now, I think about what he must have already known, what had already been set in motion, and I feel sick. Elliot's family has money, not just comfortable money, real generational old Atlanta money. His father, Mr. Hargrove Sr., built a real estate development company in the 1970s and spent the next 50 years turning it into something worth considerably more than any of us are supposed to talk about out loud. When Elliot's father died 2 years before I met Elliot, he left behind a trust that would distribute its assets, somewhere north of $40 million, to his children on specific conditions. The condition for Elliot was straightforward on paper. He had to be married and have a biological child before his 36th birthday. His 36th birthday was 4 months after my due date. I knew about the trust. Elliot had told me. He'd presented it almost apologetically, like he was embarrassed by the family legacy attached to it. I don't care about the money, he said. I want a family because I want a family, and I believed him. Elliot has one sibling, a younger brother named Prescott. Prescott had married a woman named Ingrid about 5 years before Elliot and I got together. They'd been trying to have children for years. From what Elliot told me, the fertility struggles had been painful and prolonged and ultimately unsuccessful. Prescott had not met the terms of his portion of the trust. His window had already closed. I tell you all of this because it matters. Every piece of it matters. I'd been on maternity leave for 3 weeks when I overheard the phone call. The pregnancy had been physically difficult in the final trimester. Swelling, back pain, a blood pressure issue my OB was monitoring carefully. I was spending most of my time at home, which I was not temperamentally suited for. I'm not good at stillness. I kept finding small things to do, reorganizing the nursery shelves, reading case studies on my laptop, going through old emails. That night I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs around 11 for water and a handful of crackers, and I was on my way back up when I heard Elliot's voice coming from behind the closed office door. The call was on speaker. I could hear both sides. The other voice was a man I didn't recognize. Careful, professional, clipped. He said something about a policy number and an amendment that needed to be filed before the delivery date. Elliot said, "She can't find out about the policy. Not until after the baby is born." The other man said, "And the beneficiary designation stays as discussed." "Yes," Elliot said. "Exactly as we discussed." I stood in the hallway for another 40 seconds, I counted. Then I went upstairs, put the water glass on my nightstand, and lay down in the dark next to my sleeping husband and stared at the ceiling until morning. I did not say a word. Here's what people don't understand about finding out your husband is hiding something from you. The first instinct isn't anger. It isn't even fear. It's a very particular kind of grief because in the moment you realize someone has been lying to you, you also realize that every memory you have of trusting them is now a question mark. You don't just lose the present, you lose the past too. I lay there and I thought about Kezia and how she'd raised an eyebrow at the prenup Elliot's family attorney had insisted on. I thought about my mother and what she'd said about moving too fast. I thought about small things. A conversation Elliot and Prescott had in the kitchen that stopped when I walked in. An insurance document I'd seen on his desk once that he'd flipped face down before I could read it. A phone call he'd taken outside when we were supposed to be having dinner. I am a forensic accountant. I find things people try to hide. The next morning, after Elliot left for a property walkthrough, I went into his office. It took me 4 days to find everything. I was careful about it. I didn't move anything, didn't take anything, photographed everything with my phone, and put it back exactly where I found it. I went through his filing cabinet, his desk drawers, his laptop. He'd never changed the password from the one he'd given me when I helped him with a tax question 2 years ago. I found the insurance policy immediately. It was a $2 million life insurance policy on me taken out 8 months ago, with Prescott listed as a secondary beneficiary behind Elliot. That alone wasn't criminal. Unusual, yes. Alarming, yes. But not proof of anything except bad judgment and poor transparency in a marriage. What I found next was different. There was an email thread, buried in a folder inside a folder, labeled with a string of numbers that would have meant nothing to anyone who wasn't looking for something to mean something. The thread was between Elliot and someone saved in his contacts only as RM. The emails went back 14 months. They talked about timelines, they talked about what they called the arrangement, they talked about a doctor. In one email sent the week after we found out I was pregnant, Elliot wrote, "The delivery has to happen at Prentice. I've already spoken to him. He knows what to do with the paperwork." I sat back in his desk chair and put my hand on my stomach. My daughter kicked. I said out loud to no one, "I've got you, baby, I've got you." I want to be honest about something. I was scared. I was 8 months pregnant, I was alone in a house with a man I no longer trusted, and I did not know the full shape of what I was dealing with. The rational thing, the thing every true crime podcast would tell you to do, was to get out immediately, call someone, get to safety, but I had 2 problems with that. The first problem was that I didn't know who RM was or how far this went. If I ran before I understood the full picture, I might get out safe while giving them time to cover their tracks. The legal case against Elliot would evaporate. The second problem was the doctor. My OB was a woman named Dr. Finch, who I loved and trusted. My delivery was scheduled at Emory. But Elliot had referenced Prentice Medical in those emails, a smaller private hospital on the north side of the city. I had never once agreed to deliver there. I hadn't even toured it. Which meant someone, Elliot, or RM, or this unnamed doctor, was planning to redirect my delivery without my knowledge or consent. I didn't know what would happen to me when I got there. I didn't know what would happen to my daughter. That was when I called my mother. My mother's name is Darlene, and she drove 4 hours from Savannah without a single question when I told her I needed her. She didn't ask why. She just said, "I'm already packing a bag." I met her at a coffee shop 2 miles from the house while Elliot was at work. I told her everything I knew. I watched her face go through every emotion available to a human face in the space of about 6 minutes. At the end, she reached across the table and put her hand on mine and said, "Tell me what you need." I needed 2 things. I needed her to stay with me so I wasn't alone in the house. And I needed to make a phone call I'd been sitting on for 3 days. I have a client, former client technically since I was on leave, at the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit in Atlanta. I'd worked with him on a fraud investigation 2 years prior. His name is Agent Colburn, and he is the kind of man who picks up the phone on the second ring, even when the number is unfamiliar. I told him I might have something for him. I told him I needed him to listen before he said anything. He listened. When I finished, there was a pause. Then he said, "Claire, I need you to send me everything you photographed. Tonight." The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. Agent Colburn moved quickly once I gave him the documents. RM, it turned out, was a man named Raymond Marsh, a semi-retired estate attorney who had worked for the Hargrove family for over 20 years. He had been the one to structure the original trust. He also, as the FBI discovered within 72 hours of my initial call, had been quietly helping Prescott and Ingrid explore options for obtaining a child, specifically, my child, through what I can only describe as a bribed and falsified hospital transfer arrangement. The plan, as I came to understand it through Colburn, was this. Elliot would ensure I delivered at Prentice Medical. A doctor there, a man named Dr. Aldrich, who had significant gambling debts and had apparently decided that clearing them was worth the destruction of his medical career and his freedom, would handle the delivery. My daughter would be recorded in the hospital system as a stillbirth. Prescott and Ingrid would receive her through a private arrangement Raymond Marsh had structured to look, on paper, like an overseas private adoption. I would leave the hospital without my baby. Elliot would have fulfilled the technical terms of his trust. The money would distribute. Prescott would raise my daughter as his own, and I would presumably grieve and eventually move on, never knowing. When Colburn explained this to me in full, sitting in a conference room at the FBI field office on a Tuesday afternoon, I asked him to give me a minute. I went to the restroom. I ran cold water over my wrists until I stopped shaking. Then I went back in and said, "What do you need from me?" I delivered my daughter on a Wednesday morning, 3 days ahead of schedule, at Emory University Hospital under my own OB with a security detail that Colburn had arranged without anyone outside our circle of trust knowing it existed. I had not told Elliot about any of it. He drove me to the hospital when my contractions started. He held my hand in the admissions area. He looked me in the eyes and said he loved me, and I held his hand and said nothing and thought about the fact that there were federal agents in the parking structure and 2 more in the waiting area and 1 stationed outside my delivery room door. 14 hours later, my daughter was born. She was 7 pounds 2 ounces, and she screamed with an impressive volume that made the nurses laugh. I held her, and I cried in a way I had not cried in months. Clean crying, the kind that comes from the other side of something. 3 floors below us, in the hospital lobby, Elliot was placing a call, presumably to let someone know how things had gone. The agents monitoring his phone had what they needed within minutes. He was arrested in the hospital parking lot at 11:47 that night. Raymond Marsh was arrested the following morning at his home in Buckhead. Dr. Aldrich surrendered to federal authorities the same afternoon. Prescott and Ingrid were taken in for questioning and ultimately charged as co-conspirators. Yes, both of them, which I want to say clearly because I know how easy it is to let the person who seems less directly involved slip through. Ingrid had known. She had approved every step. She was not a passive bystander, and Agent Colburn did not treat her as one. The charges included conspiracy to commit fraud, falsification of medical records, violations of federal adoption statutes, and wire fraud in connection with the insurance policy. Raymond Marsh, who had apparently done this kind of creative legal architecture before for other clients, faced the most significant exposure. The prenup, as it turned out, worked entirely in my favor once fraud was established as the foundation of the marriage. My attorney, a woman named Patricia I'd found through a referral from my firm's general counsel, was extraordinary. I will not get into the financial specifics because some of it is still in litigation, but I will say that the Hargrove Family Trust, under the circumstances, distributed nothing to Elliot. The conditions he claimed to have met were met through criminal conduct. The trustee, upon advice of counsel, froze disbursement pending the criminal proceedings. The house is mine, my daughter is mine, my name is mine. People ask me sometimes, when I've told pieces of this story to friends, to my mother, to Kezia, who cried for 20 minutes straight and then immediately started researching custody law on her phone, they ask me how I stayed so calm through all of it. How I kept living in that house, sleeping next to him, saying good morning and asking about his day. I tell them the truth. I stayed calm because I had something to do. As long as I was building the case, collecting evidence, making calls, thinking through the next step, I didn't have to fully feel what was happening. I had a job. I have always been better at jobs than at feelings. The feelings came later. They came in waves in the first few weeks after my daughter was born. In the small hours when she'd wake to eat and I'd sit in the rocking chair in the dark, holding her, and think about everything that almost happened. Those nights were hard. I won't pretend otherwise. But here's the thing about being a forensic accountant. You learn, over years of doing this work, that the cover-up always costs more than the thing being covered up. The people who cheat and lie and manipulate, they always assume they're smarter than the person they're doing it to. They factor in everything except the possibility that the person they underestimated is going to look at their numbers and know exactly what story those numbers are telling. Elliot thought I was just his pregnant wife. He forgot I was also the person who finds what people try to hide. My daughter is 4 months old now. She has my eyes and an opinion about everything, which she communicates loudly and without apology. My mother has been here most of the time, sleeping in the guest room, making too much food, arguing with me about what temperature to set the thermostat. It's the best thing in my life, that arguing, that ordinary, everyday, completely safe arguing. Kezia comes over on Saturday mornings and we drink coffee and she holds the baby while I catch up on work emails, easing back in slowly a few hours a week. My firm has been patient with me. The partners know what happened, some of it, the broad strokes, and they have been decent about it in a way I didn't take for granted. Last month, Agent Colburn sent me a message to let me know that the first round of plea deals had been entered. Elliot took a deal. I don't want to talk about the specifics of what that means for his sentence, except to say that his 36th birthday came and went inside a federal holding facility, and the trust distributed $0 to anyone bearing the Hargrove name. I sat on my back porch when I got that message, and I watched the evening come in over the backyard, and I thought about that night in the hallway. My socks on the hardwood floor, the water glass in my hand, the kick I felt against my ribs at the exact moment I realized something was wrong. She knew before I did. My girl has always had good instincts, she gets that from me.